Tonight, we're in Saudi Arabia as Iran ramps up its attacks on the Strait of Hormuz, putting the world's oil supply in its crosshairs. Growing threats against the crucial shipping route as gas prices rise and countries tap into their strategic oil reserves. Plus, strikes between Israel and Hezbollah heat up. The deadly consequences on full display.
The federal Liberals are on the brink of a majority government after an NDP MP crosses the floor. The new political dynamic in Ottawa and the backlash from opposition parties, calling it undemocratic. Plus, calls from the Canadian Cancer Society for changes to who gets screened for colorectal cancer.
This was the worst day of my life. Like, no one should have to tell their kids that.
The rising rates of the disease among younger adults.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and Erica Johnson.
Thanks for joining us. Mark Carney has a new MP in his ranks tonight after a fourth floor crossing. The Liberals are now tantalizingly close to forming a majority government, creating a potential power shift in the House of Commons. The Prime Minister welcoming his latest recruit to the Liberal caucus, Nunavut MP Lori Idlout. She represents Canada's largest geographic riding and says threats to the country's sovereignty inspired her to join the Liberals. Carney is now just 2 seats shy of a majority. And as Ashley Burke explains, with several by-elections just around the corner, the Liberals are on the cusp of achieving that.
You're all standing up. There you go.
The Liberals welcoming another new MP to their party. Lori Idlout, the first member of the NDP to defect to the Carney government, bringing the Liberals 2 seats away from a majority.
I'm very honored to welcome Lori Idlout to our caucus.
Less than a week ago, Idlout appeared on stage to support the NDP's leadership race.
It's great to be here.
But now says she felt she was betraying her constituents by staying with the party.
What incentivized you?
Like with any complicated issue, it wasn't just one thing that happened. There are a variety of many things that have allowed me to really reflect on this, and I'm very thankful to be so warmly welcomed.
Idlout represents Nunavut and says new threats to Canada's sovereignty also played a role.
I am proud to join a team that will take the larger picture of meeting the current political environment and is set on meeting the immediate needs of the North.
Her decision comes after 3 Conservative MPs crossed the floor one by one. The Prime Minister bringing in converts from both the right and now the left.
This is now very much, in a way, a national unity government. He is pulling members of Parliament from the 2 most opposite sides of the political spectrum.
The latest floor crossing, a big blow to the NDP.
What does this mean for your party, sir?
No comments.
The NDP's fighting for its survival and now reduced to 6 seats.
What does this do for morale in the caucus?
Right now, Canada needs the NDP more than any other time in our history. I can tell you that. Canadians are about to learn that real quick.
They're now joining the Conservatives, calling floor crossing straight up undemocratic.
I'm becoming increasingly concerned by the way that Mr. Carney is trying to stitch together a majority government in this country.
Mark Carney is getting through backroom deals what he couldn't get in the last election.
Our colleagues in Iqaluit spoke to 2 mayors in Idlout's riding. They said in Inuktitut they weren't surprised she changed parties and felt she would have more of a voice with the Liberals.
And Ashley, what more do we know about Idlout's decision?
Well, Erica, I reached her by phone briefly tonight. She said that she had conversations in December with Liberal MPs about changing parties and wasn't promised anything in return for deciding to join. Now, her move brings the Liberals to 170 seats, with 3 by-elections set for April, including in 2 ridings considered safe Liberal seats. The party has a chance to secure a majority government this spring.
Thanks for this. That's Ashley Burke reporting in Ottawa tonight. And for more analysis on this, Aaron Wary, senior writer with CBC's Parliamentary Bureau, joins me now. Aaron, Mark Carney is now on the cusp of a majority government. If that happens, how does that change things for the Liberals moving forward?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest change would obviously be the fact that they conceivably wouldn't have to worry about an election until 2029. And time is really no small thing for a government. That said, I think the larger question here is what a majority would mean for how Mark Carney governs. Is he going to be more bold, more ambitious with his agenda? We've already seen, over the past year, the government have to amend some legislation when opposition concerns have been raised, particularly when the opposition has zeroed in on aspects of legislation that seem to give the government too many powers. In theory, going forward, if the Liberals were to have a majority, Mark Carney wouldn't necessarily have to worry about those opposition concerns anymore. So does he feel, that he can move faster and move further? On the other hand, I think, if it's a narrow Liberal majority, this actually could give some leverage to the Liberal backbench. And we've already seen, including in recent days, that the Liberal backbench has a certain independent streak. So I think it would be interesting to watch, if it does come to pass that the Liberals end up with a narrow majority, whether the Liberal backbench starts to have more influence over legislation.
All right. And what position does this put opposition parties in?
Yeah, look, this is obviously a setback for the NDP. They were already reduced to a historic low after the last election, and they're going to have to fight that much harder now for relevancy. For Pierre Poilievre, in a strange way, this could be good news, I guess. The Conservatives really aren't in a position to be wanting to go into an election right now, so they may actually like the time. We know Pierre Poilievre is on his way to the United States. That's kind of follows on his trip from Europe. I think you can see that as part of a larger effort to sort of burnish his international credentials. But he may now be in a position where, coming back to Ottawa, he has to really give some serious thought to kind of how he wants to position the opposition going up against what may, very soon be a Liberal majority.
All right, thanks for this. That's Aaron Wary in Ottawa tonight.
I'm here in Riyadh, in the heart of one of the most important oil-producing regions of the world. Production jeopardized by Iran, a potential chokehold on the global economy still tightening. Despite more than 11 straight days of U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, the country keeps hitting this region. Over the past 24 hours, there are reports of 2 oil tankers attacked in Iraqi waters and 3 cargo ships hit as they tried to enter the Strait of Hormuz. If you've been following the war, you probably know that strait. It's a gap not even 40 kilometers wide at its narrowest point between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula, through which a fifth of the world's oil and gas travels. Now, it's too dangerous to cross. All the American military might in this region has not been enough to release Iran's grip on that strait. This is one spot where the Islamic Republic, for now, appears to have the upper hand.
Escalation threatened, escalation delivered. An explosives-laden Iranian boat taking out 2 oil tankers in the Persian Gulf. Hours earlier, this moment. Video verified by CBC News, a drone strike on oil tanks in a port in Oman. That is the country that was trying to negotiate peace before this war started. And this, a Thai cargo ship attacked, 3 crew missing. One of 3 vessels struck trying to enter the Strait of Hormuz. The threats don't stop. This chaotic video airing on Iranian state TV, allegedly at the entrance to the Strait of Hormuz, claiming that those are foreign ships lined up with transponders off. As soon as they turn on, the IRGC hits them with drones, he says, even if they move a few dozen meters. Maybe that is just bravado. Maybe it is the case that the Americans have destroyed Iran's mining ships as they claim, and maybe the U.S. president is right to sound so confident.
Are you talking to CEOs of various oil companies, encouraging them to use the Strait of Hormuz right now? I think they should. I think they should use it.
3 ships attacked.
Problem is, will shipping companies take that risk?
Ships won't attempt it if they don't have confidence that the US is in control of the situation and can protect them. The riskier it is, and the harder it is to get insurance.
To prevent oil prices spiking further, the International Energy Agency recommended the biggest release of emergency oil reserves in history. Just a temporary fix.
The most important thing for a return to stable flows of oil and gas is the resumption of transit through the Strait of Hormuz.
Who decides that? Iran seems to think it has leverage, launched more strikes over civilian sites in the Gulf. Said in retaliation for attacks on one of its banks, it will target banks and big American companies located throughout the Gulf states. Some firms sending employees home and closing branches. To be so close to Iran and an ally of the U.S. like Saudi Arabia is not easy now.
What makes us nervous or actually frustrates us is that this is something that we've been warning of for decades. The worst outcome possible is what you call a wounded lion, whereby perhaps the warring parties declare victory prematurely, and you leave Iran wounded and dangerous, and guess who has the proximity and who will be suffering the most? It will be the neighboring countries.
Now, a few more signals of that. Tonight, for the second night in a row, the Saudi Defense Ministry says it has intercepted and destroyed ballistic missiles over its skies, while a spokesperson with the Iranian Armed Forces says the Strait of Hormuz is, quote, undoubtedly under Iran's control. Now, Energy Minister Tim Hodgson said Canada will support the international effort to stabilize oil prices, but how isn't exactly straightforward.
We're producing at capacity right now. We're doing our part in the world, but we can do more.
Hodgson said the government was in discussions with oil companies to delay taking routine downtime, push production to overcapacity for brief periods, and have refineries switch to Canadian crude so foreign oil could be refined elsewhere. But Canada has no strategic reserve and no easy long-term way to get more oil to market. However, tonight, the United States said it will release more than 170 million barrels, about 40% of its total strategic petroleum reserve. A notable move for Donald Trump, who Katie Nicholson shows us is already claiming victory.
Operation Epic Fury!
U.S. President Donald Trump taking his message about the war with Iran on the road.
We did an excursion. You know what an excursion is? We had to take a little trip.
A war he keeps calling an excursion.
It's an excursion that will keep us out of a war. And the war is going to be, for them it's a war. For us, it's turned out to be easier than we thought.
In Tehran, a massive crowd pulsing with grief and defiance at a funeral for Iranian commanders. All these people will defend their homeland and their new leader to the last drop of their blood, she says. The U.S. State Department has issued a new warning Iran may target U.S.-owned oil and energy infrastructure and hotels in Iraq. As for any potential off-ramps to this conflict, Iran's president posted, "The only way to end the war is the acceptance of Iran's indisputable rights, payment of reparations, and a firm international obligation to prevent their aggression from recurring." The toll of this war on civilians and on any U.S. reputation for protecting them is also rising. A preliminary U.S. military investigation into the February 28th airstrike on a girls' school in southern Iran pointing to an American targeting error. According to Iranian officials, at least 175 people, many of them children, died there. Trump continued to brush off any suggestion of U.S. responsibility.
As Commander-in-Chief, do you take responsibility for that?
That is what?
As Commander-in-Chief, do you...
For what?
For the strike on the school in Iran. A new report says the military investigation has found it was the United States that struck the school.
I don't know about it.
The U.S. president also avoiding any timeline on when the war will end.
We don't want to leave early, do we? We got to finish the job, right?
Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Washington.
Lebanon is facing yet another wave of airstrikes tonight. The bombardment showing no signs of easing as the death toll there climbs past 600. So let's bring in Susan Ormiston now in Beirut. Susan, it sounds like there's a lot going on tonight.
There is a very loud night, the loudest since this war began. We've heard a series of very big blasts in the last half hour. We put on our PPE for our protection. It seems that this is another salvo by the Israeli Defense Force on the southern suburbs in Beirut after a cascading wave of attacks tonight about 9 p.m. local, which really lit up the skies with this dark, thick black smoke and red flames as they landed about a dozen hits on those suburbs. This is the IDF's response to Hezbollah, which launched its own rockets, a volley into northern Israel earlier tonight. And this, Adrian, comes after a day of escalating tension and loss. She lost her husband in the early morning. One of at least 8 killed when an Israeli airstrike sliced into a small cement factory in a rural area. They were Syrians living and working in Lebanon. Abed Mohammed Sullivan shows us his tent. He was sleeping here with his wife and kids when they heard a huge blast. The kids started screaming and crying. I hugged them. We went outside and saw a catastrophe. Body parts everywhere, he said. He showed us where shrapnel had pierced and damaged his home. Why would they target this place? We don't know. There's nothing here, he says. A wave of strikes Wednesday swept across Lebanon at a car parts shop here in the Bekaa Valley, in Beirut's southern suburbs. And at dawn, pounding into an apartment building in the heart of the capital. Enough is enough, she says. This is a nightmare. When will it end? The Israeli military says it's still intercepting missiles coming from Iran-backed Hezbollah. And it's sending reinforcements to the northern Israeli border. But there's less intelligence on what the IDF is targeting beyond what it calls Hezbollah infrastructure and command centers. The pattern has been over the last week that the Israeli military gives advance warning of the areas they are going to strike, allowing time for people to get out. The families here say this time that didn't happen. We've asked the IDF to clarify. What is clear is the growing number of casualties, nearly 640 dead in 10 days, according to Lebanon's government. This woman at Riak Hospital lost 6 family members in that strike. She's in shock. The hospital coordinator says 2 children are still in critical condition, one with a brain hemorrhage. Why children?
I don't know. It's a war. No, nothing is fair, I think.
Not fair, but brutal, with escalating pressure and no retreat from Hezbollah.
And Susan, as you just showed us, these strikes are certainly taking a very heavy toll on civilians.
Yeah, I mean, as you heard, people are fed up. We're hearing lots of sirens now in the dead of night. But the Lebanese government seems powerless to stop Hezbollah from sending rockets into Israel or directly speak with Israel. And we are hearing tonight that the Iranian Revolutionary Guards have said that this attack into northern Israel today by Hezbollah was a joint operation between Iran and Hezbollah. So the pace of this campaign is heating up.
All right, thank you. That is Susan Ormiston in Beirut tonight. So we'll have more on the war's economic toll later in the show. But for now, that's it from us in Riyadh. I'll hand things over to Erica in Vancouver now with more of your top stories from Canada.
Thanks, Adrian. Ottawa has allocated $10 million to bolster safety in Canada's Jewish communities.
To the Jewish communities in Toronto and across Canada, I want you to know your government stands with you against anti-Semitism, hatred, and violence in all its forms.
The announcement comes just days after a string of shootings targeting synagogues in the Toronto area. Nobody was hurt in those incidents. The money will be used to reinforce security at synagogues, schools, daycares, and community centers. RCMP in Nova Scotia have done more polygraph tests related to the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, focusing on one of the only pieces of physical evidence found when the kids went missing from their rural property last May, a torn piece of blanket discovered by their aunt and uncle.
There was some things said that the blanket was planted by Hayden and I, which we were the ones that found it, and that wasn't the case, so they just wanted to rule that out. Anything that's going to bring us closer to having answers for Lilly and Jack, I was there.
The pink piece of fabric was found in a tree not far from the children's home. There's been no trace of the 6- and 4-year-old, despite massive ground, air, and canine searches throughout the area. There's a new call tonight to lower the screening age in Canada for colorectal cancer.
It is not a disease of the elderly anymore.
The push for change as younger Canadians increasingly get diagnosed.
Plus, just how high gas prices could go as war rages in the Middle East.
That's absolutely plausible to hit $200 a barrel.
We have the biggest supply shock in history.
And it's not just oil. Fertilizer prices are also skyrocketing.
This is just going to take a tough situation and make it much, much worse.
How Canadian farmers are coping ahead of the crucial spring planting season. We're back in 2.
Parts of western Quebec and eastern Ontario are bracing for the worst of a freezing rainstorm. Officials are warning of possible power outages and dangerous road conditions. In anticipation, schools closed in some areas, and dozens of flights out of local airports were cancelled. The Canadian Cancer Society is calling for people to get screened for colorectal cancer earlier than the current guidelines. The push comes as doctors increasingly diagnose younger adults with the disease. Shauna Reid now with the evidence and why early detection is crucial.
Steve Slack says he's grateful to be here. In 2018, he was diagnosed with food sensitivities after abdominal pain and changes to his bowel habits. 3 years later, things got worse.
That was just the beginning of a pretty long and difficult journey.
After seeing blood in his stool, his doctor ordered a colonoscopy. He recalls receiving the results.
Steve, I found a very large cancer tumor in your colon, and you need emergency surgery.
At 46, he was diagnosed with colorectal cancer, and it had spread to his liver.
This was the worst day of my life. Like, absolutely, no one should have to tell their kids that.
Adults under 50 are increasingly being diagnosed with colorectal cancer. It's why the Canadian Cancer Society is urging provinces and territories to lower the screening age for colorectal cancer to 45 instead of 50. Recent evidence shows Canadians born after 1980 are at least 2 times more likely to be diagnosed with it compared to previous generations, and more often at a later stage.
I was diagnosed with rectal cancer at the age of 34.
Tuesday, on Parliament Hill, survivors and advocates lobbied for earlier testing. The U.S., Japan, and Australia have already lowered the age for colorectal screening, some as low as 40.
It is not a disease of the elderly anymore.
Dr. Shadi Ashmala treats young adults at Toronto's Sunnybrook Cancer Centre.
We know this is a curable, treatable disease, always if caught early enough.
Routine screening is done using an at-home kit. A stool sample is sent to a lab where it is checked for hidden blood. If positive, or for patients with symptoms, a colonoscopy is recommended.
Let's go for a look.
After treatment and a liver transplant, Steve's scans show no sign of cancer. But he wonders how different things would be if he was screened earlier. Shauna Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
A majority government is in sight for the federal Liberals with the defection of an NDP MP.
I'm very honored to welcome Lori Idlip to our caucus.
After the 4th floor crossing in 4 months, tonight a closer look at the polls ahead of 3 key by-elections. In particular, the tight race playing out in a Montreal area riding.
If you have to choose a favorite here, the Liberals are seemingly having some momentum in Quebec in the polls lately.
The National returns with in-depth analysis of tonight's top stories next.
Air Transat says it is charging more for flights to Europe as the war in the Middle East causes fuel prices to skyrocket. The airline says it's hiking fuel surcharges as part of the ticket cost. A number of international airlines have done the same. Canadian carriers, WestJet, Air Canada, and Porter Airlines say they are monitoring the situation but did not confirm future pricing. Now, the war in the Middle East is rapidly driving up costs for farmers in Canada just as spring planting begins. Fertilizer prices are spiking as disruptions squeeze the global supply. Alexander Silberman now on what that could mean for food production.
A lot of added stress coming into seeding, which no one wants.
With spring planting just weeks away, Cody Nagy is alarmed by skyrocketing fertilizer costs for his Saskatchewan farm.
Quite a bit of sticker shock when I'd heard the price.
The expense of critical nutrients needed to grow food pushed up as much as 60% as the Iran war cuts off supply chains.
Completely out of our control, which is even more frustrating.
Fuel prices are up, fertilizer's up. How much more pressure can producers take?
It's everywhere we look, there's stress, and it seems like that's the going trend lately.
Canadian farmers are feeling the pinch of the conflict in the Middle East. A significant amount of global fertilizer trade passes through the Strait of Hormuz, a choke point shut down after Iran said it would set fire to any ships attempting to pass through.
A lot of farmers had been putting off making fertilizer commitments because of their own challenging financial position. And this is just going to take a tough situation and make it much, much worse.
Even though Canada produces its own nitrogen-based fertilizer, buyers here are still hit by the surge in global prices.
Spike in wheat, canola, corn, soybeans, the major crops, that may offset some of these fertilizer or these input cost spikes. But if we don't get that spike in prices, it's going to be a tough year.
Nagy is now getting ready to plant his crops, thankful to have enough fertilizer in storage bins for the spring, but worried about the fall.
Margins are tight. They're going to be tighter next year if this persists.
The longer the war continues, producers could be forced to put reduced fertilizer into the ground, but fewer nutrients will ultimately mean less food from an industry shaken by volatility. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, near Ogama, Saskatchewan.
Here in Saudi Arabia, oil outputs have already been cut, so that is adding to another economic pain point of this war, the climbing price of gas. Countries in the Middle East are sitting on a backlog of barrels, unable to ship oil to world markets. The fear now is prices could reach historic highs.
Energy greases the wheels of the economy. It's obviously going to impact everything.
Just today, the news, a large-scale release of oil reserves is coming.
This is a major action aiming to alleviate the immediate impacts of the disruption in markets.
The hope is prices will stabilize. Andrew Chang of About That shows us how we got here and why predicting where things go next is so hard.
There's always a huge gap in how much Americans pay for gas, depending on where they live. Last I checked, look at the average price in California, for example, compared to the average price in Kansas. But no matter which state you look at, they all have one thing in common. Prices have broadly been going up because the price of crude oil has broadly been going up.
Israeli strikes on 4 oil storage depots and a refining facility in Tehran.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard is sending radio transmissions to ships warning them that, quote, no ship is allowed to pass the Strait of Hormuz.
Oil prices have been on a roller coaster and remain quite a bit higher this morning.
Donald Trump acknowledges this is happening, but he calls the jumps short-term increases, a very small price to pay for peace, and only fools would think differently. He might be right. Here's the international benchmark price of crude. Here's the short-term price spike he's referring to, peaking at just under $120 US a barrel. And here's the subsequent drop that Trump's alluding to. But he might also be wrong. That critical waterway through which Middle East oil flows out to world markets is still largely closed. Iran has meanwhile threatened to strike back at oil facilities in neighboring countries. This puts into play as much as a third of the world's oil production. If you can tolerate oil at more than $200 per barrel, says Iran, continue this game.
Well, I mean, it's plausible. If this goes on for another month and you're just not seeing those tankers go through, that's absolutely plausible to hit $200 a barrel.
We have the biggest supply shock in history. Oil prices will have to rise to levels that cause economic damage. So I would guess in the 150, 160 range. $200 cannot be ruled out, however, but I don't think the economy could handle $200 for very long.
$200 a barrel would be somewhere around twice the current price, give or take. Now, what I can't do is predict the course of the war. What I can do is show you why very few experts are even bothering to try.
I mean, listen, nobody knows. And the people who sit across the table from you and wag their finger and say they do know simply don't.
It's hard to overstate just how much oil is in the Middle East and stuck in the Middle East. You take a country like Saudi Arabia. They alone have more than 250 billion barrels of oil in known reserves. Iran, more than 200 billion. In fact, look at all the countries surrounding the Persian Gulf: Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, and Bahrain. Together, they make up half of the world's known oil reserves. And getting that oil out to world markets, they all rely on the same narrow passageway, the Strait of Hormuz, where about 1/5 of the world's oil production transits through each and every day, somewhere between 15 and 20 million barrels a day on average. But that oil isn't really moving right now.
Iranian media reports that authorities have been ordered to set any ship trying to pass through on fire.
All the oil and gas that has been produced in the region is not being supplied through.
So that's a big reason the price of oil has surged up. Oil tankers, unwilling to risk their cargo, create a backlog of barrels with nowhere to go, which has led some of the world's biggest oil producers to cut production. They're having to shut down oil fields because what good does it do to pump oil when you have no way of selling it?
It's been scaled back extensively. I think we probably lost more supply than I think we've ever lost in any other shock or any other event.
And so all of the problems right now are about trying to figure out either how to shut down the oil production or find a place to put it. And they've run out of places to put it.
Add to that how dropping a bomb or firing a missile at an oil depot threatens supply.
The bombings just make it a bigger concern, and they heighten the risk that all of this could escalate yet further.
If we see infrastructure knocked out by, for example, a drone or a ballistic missile, it can take months or even years in some cases to repair that piece of infrastructure.
And you start to understand why the price of crude jumped 25% in just 3 days.
G7 meeting of finance ministers held a meeting to discuss the possibility of a joint release of emergency oil reserves.
Now, on Monday, G7 countries met to discuss whether to release onto world markets hundreds of millions of barrels of oil that they've stockpiled as a way of bringing oil prices back down. Collectively, the 32 members of the International Energy Agency, of which all G7 countries are a part, they're estimated to hold just over 1.2 billion barrels of emergency oil in strategic reserves, plus another 600 million barrels of industry oil that private companies hold, also for emergencies. Releasing up to 400 million of those barrels, a full third of government stockpiles, but at the same time, an amount of oil the world typically burns through in under a week. That was the topic of discussion on Monday among G7 finance ministers. But Monday came and went with no clear sign of action. They punted the decision to the following day, and they did manage to arrive at a decision they hope will help stabilize oil prices. For how long? Still an open question.
The agency agreed to release 400 million oil barrels, the largest emergency oil distribution in its history.
This is a major action aiming to alleviate the immediate impacts of the disruption in markets.
Now, you and I don't buy oil. We buy gas, and the price of gas has already been shooting up since the start of the war on Iran. Here's the national average on a gallon of gas in the US today, compared to as recently as a week ago. That's a big jump. And one petroleum analyst put the odds earlier this week at 80% that the price of gas would reach a national average of $4 a gallon. For us here in Canada, that's about $1.43 Canadian per liter. Now, those odds are always changing, but just to give you a sense of how high we've seen the price ceiling go, consider the last time we saw a serious cratering of confidence.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin has launched a major military operation against Ukraine.
When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, what followed was the biggest spike in the price of oil the world had seen in almost 15 years. And that summer, In the US, the national average for gas crossed the $5 a gallon threshold. The United States had never seen the national average that high before and has not since. But even that isn't the ceiling, because you remember that state map I showed you at the start and how California tends to have higher prices because of higher taxes, stricter energy rules, different supply chains. Their record average price of gas during that first summer of the war in Ukraine, $6.43 a gallon, which would be $2.30 a liter in Canada. And on a really local level, we can go higher still, because in some parts of LA at that time, some gas stations were charging more than $8 a gallon, which is approaching $3 a liter Canadian. Now, I'm not saying the war in Iran will produce these outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, $2 seems to be a high level watermark, in Canada, and there's a psychological barrier there as well. I'll say in the United States, $5 a gallon, that is also a psychological barrier. That is important because you do expect governments will start reacting once consumers are hitting those levels in the United States.
And there are already clear signs the Trump administration is seeing the spike in gas, the spike in oil, and then trying to rein things in. Oil prices have receded slightly on news that Trump says he wants to wind the war down and, along with allies, begin providing military escorts to tankers carrying oil. But words are easy to issue, easy to take back, hard to decipher. So most of the headlines I'm seeing right now, mixed messages, again and again and again. So you start to understand why world leaders are so preoccupied right now with the prospect of this energy problem turning into an energy crisis.
The reality here is that that oil prices are an extremely politically important factor. Households really notice when oil prices go up. They definitely, drive inflation expectations.
Energy greases the wheels of the economy, and it's felt in just about everything that we produce or consume. And so it's obviously going to impact everything.
Because the price of oil affects the price of gas, which affects the cost to fly a plane, drive a truck, deliver a couch, power a machine, make plastic or fertilizer. There are people whose job it is to calculate how every single percentage point of sustained rise in oil prices results in what percentage of global inflation and what slowdown in global economic growth. But trying to predict that first number, where oil prices are headed next?
We have no idea how long this will go, how sharp the escalation could be, and what happens in any of those scenarios.
Right now, it's all just one big question mark, and a very costly one at that.
As we mentioned earlier, the United States confirmed it will release 172 million barrels of oil from its strategic reserve as part of the broader plan from the IEA. So that is all from us here in Riyadh tonight. Now it is back to Erica in Vancouver.
Thanks, Adrian. Coming up, an NDP MP joins the Liberals.
Lori, what did the government say to get you to cross the floor?
We dive into the dynamics in Ottawa as the Liberals inch closer to a majority. That's next.
I'm very honored to welcome Lori to our caucus.
A majority government is within the Liberals' grasp. Lori Idlout is the fourth MP to cross the floor since November.
I'm very thankful to be so warmly welcomed.
But will the political momentum continue? It will all come down to 3 by-elections next month. So how could the path to a majority shape up? For more on this, let's bring in poll analyst Eric Grenier. Eric, there are 3 by-elections coming up next month, 2 in Ontario, 1 in Quebec. Before the floor crossing, the Liberals needed to win all 3. Now they only need 2. So what do the polls suggest could happen on April 13th?
Well, we are expecting that the Liberals are in a very strong position to win the 2 seats in Toronto. They were both very safe seats for the Liberals in the last election, and the polls are suggesting that the party is doing better in Ontario than it was in the last election. It is in Terrebonne in Quebec where there are a lot of questions about what's going to happen there. It was a dead heat in the last election, decided by a single vote. We've seen some polls that suggest that the Liberals have made some ground on the bloc in Quebec, But we've seen some other polls that suggest that not all that much has changed. So it does seem like Terrebonne will be the riding to watch, that it could be just as close as last time. But if you have to choose a favorite here, the Liberals are seemingly having some momentum in Quebec in the polls lately.
All right. Now, there has been a lot of speculation about the possibility of a federal election as the Liberals ride high in the polls. How does this development change their calculations?
It does seem to remove one of the biggest rationales they would have had for a snap call. If they are able to win all three by-elections, that would bump them up to 173 seats in the House of Commons. It would give them a two-seat majority, which means that the Speaker wouldn't have to break any of the ties. And it would remove the rationale for an election entirely. If Mark Carney went to the Canadian people saying that he needed a new majority mandate to deal with Trump, to deal with Kuzma negotiations, but had a majority in the House at the same time, I'm not sure if Canadians would buy that argument. So this could take an election off the table in the short term. In the longer term, well, we've seen how quickly things can change in the House of Commons with floor crossers, with people resigning. A 1 or 2 seat majority is by no means a guarantee.
No. Now, unsurprisingly, opposition parties have not been happy about losing MPs to the Liberals. What do we know about what Canadians think of MPs who cross the floor?
Well, there's two different ways to answer that. One, when we see the polls on what Canadians think about floor crossing, generally speaking, they don't like it. They think that if an MP wants to cross to another party, they should resign first and a by-election be held. But we've seen actually in the past few elections that floor crossers generally do pretty well, and they don't seem to get punished by voters when it actually comes time for an election. I think it shows the difference between how people feel about an individual MP and how they feel about a party or a leader as a whole in an election campaign. In a national election, it's usually about the leader, it's usually about the party, it's not usually about the name on the ballot locally.
This has got to be a stab to the heart for the NDP. They now just have 6 seats in the House of Commons. What is their biggest challenge?
Their biggest challenge is rebuilding, and they're in the midst of a leadership race that does not seem to have garnered a lot of attention from the public. They are polling in the exact same places they were in the last election. So they have a big challenge ahead of them, and to lose 1 MP to drop down to 6, and there's rumors that there could be Alexandre Boulérès who could take a run at provincial office, which would drop them down to 5. The NDP has a long ways to go. This leadership race is their best chance to try to reboot the party. But this is not the way that Avi Lewis or Heather McPherson, Rob Ashton, and the other candidates who are vying for that title, that is not how they would like to see their caucus reduced by 1 when it's already so small to begin with.
Certainly, it appears they have their work cut out for them, whoever leads the NDP. Thanks for your time on this, Eric. Appreciate your insight. Eric Grenier of The Writ joining us from Ottawa. Canada has advanced to the playoffs at the World Baseball Classic for the first time in the tournament's 20-year history.
And for the first time in its history, Canada is headed on to the World Baseball Classic quarterfinal.
Canada beat Cuba 7-2. 20 teams compete at the international tournament, which includes Major League players. The quarterfinals will be held this weekend in Houston, Texas. Coming up, a Canadian Paralympic skier wins a medal in every color.
It's definitely made me feel pretty accomplished so early in the games.
The triumph of earning 3 podium spots in just 4 days. Next, in our moment. This is Natalie Wilkie, a Canadian skier celebrating her bronze in the cross-country sprint classic event at the Milano Cortina Paralympics. That third-place finish rounded out her full set of Paralympic medals, winning a silver and gold earlier in the Games. Her 3 podium spots make our moment.
She's collected the full set at these Games.
I've done 3 races, and so far I've medaled in each race. I've won a gold, a silver, and a bronze. I earned a silver in the 7.5 kilometer biathlon sprint, in the 12.5 kilometer individual biathlon race. It was gold, and on cross-country sprint, they won the bronze medal.
A bronze for Wilkie to go with her biathlon gold.
The first 2 hit me pretty hard emotionally. The first race I did was the first biathlon medal I've ever won at the Paralympics, which was a pretty exciting moment for me. Once the medal was around my neck, it really just hit me like, you know, the significance of that moment. And then, of course, the following day, winning gold in the next biathlon event, that was also pretty special. It's definitely made me feel pretty accomplished so early in the Games to medal in 3 events. is pretty awesome. I could leave the games like pretty satisfied with what I've done so far, but I do have another 3 races, so I'm definitely looking forward to those.
Impressive. And she's done this before. At the Beijing Paralympics, she won a medal in every color, 1 bronze, 1 silver, and 2 gold. And the gold she won for this year's Paralympics, that was the first gold for Canada. And she didn't realize it till she'd already won the medal and somebody told her. So needless to say, it made her pretty happy. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. I'm Erica Johnson in Vancouver. Take care.